Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing really well. Today I'm going to be sharing with you a little eyeshadow swatch party. I decided to sit down and swatch all of my purple and berry eyeshadows in my collection, and those are the types of shades that I think I'm least drawn to. Like purples and blues are the colors that I'm the least drawn to, but I recently pulled the shade Drift from the Born to Run palette by Urban Decay into my Pan Those Eyeshadows project, and it has this undertone of purple that I find really interesting and I really want to play off of. So I wanted to sit and swatch through my collection, see what kind of color pairings I could come up with for that shade in particular. And we're also going into fall time now, so these like rich berries and jewel tones are really the kind of thing that I want to play around with a little bit more, maybe move a little bit away from some of the more like orange and yellow warm tones that I've been using quite a lot over the summertime. And I just thought it would be really fun to take you along for the journey again, because last time I did this with all of my green shadows, which I will have linked in the description box as well as in the cards of this video if you want to check it out. And I had so much fun just sharing all my shadows with you guys because it was just so fun to play with color. It was so fun, and I really hope that you enjoy seeing all of the purples and berries in my collection. I hope that you get some enjoyment out of this, maybe see some color comparisons of things that maybe you were eyeing up, different palettes that you think might be comparable. But yeah, I'm just so excited to hop into it and to share this with you, so let's just get on into all of the swatches. So I'm most excited to swatch my single shadows, so we're just gonna start off with anything that is kind of purpley or leans purpley in this palette. There's a handful of shades and I'm really excited to do them, so we're just gonna kick it off with these. So this first shade is Crystalline by Clionadh Cosmetics. It is a beautiful purple lilac kind of shifty shade. It definitely has a lot of blue in it, but it definitely also has that purpley kind of base. Next is Cinnabar, which pulls very burgundy, but there are hits of purple in this when it shifts. It doesn't super look purpley, but as you can see, the reflect is a little silvery kind of purple. And then also from Clionadh Cosmetics, I have Filigree here, which I think in the pan really pulls quite silver, but it definitely is a silver, dusty kind of lilac color. These ones are my singles from Colourpop. This one is called Prowlin, which is a very faint lilac, very pastel metallic. Such a beautiful shade, and it's very underutilized in my collection. This next one here is called Cakewalk, which is again one of those like purple blue sort of shifty shades, but very faint. I'm not sure if they even have this one anymore, to be honest. I think this may be just from a limited edition collection for their birthday. And then lastly from Colourpop singles, this one is called 143. This is a gorgeous warm berry kind of purple shade. I love these kinds of tones. This one's not my absolute favorite in terms of formula, but it is really beautiful. I love warm purples. I'm not really too sure if I would consider this one purple, but I want to swatch it to see. This one is called Cute Alert from Colourpop, and it's like a slightly purpley based burgundy shade. Yeah, there's definitely a hit of purple in there. It's definitely not very prominent. There is a base of purple. So sticking with the singles theme, this one is by Colourpop. This is a Super Shock shadow in the shade Couche. I don't think this is advertised in any capacity as having purple, but I definitely see some very faint purple in here. It's like a taupey purple frosty kind of shade, and I don't know, there definitely is just that little bit of purple to me. I'm not certain, but I definitely feel like I see it. And it's such a gorgeous shade. You guys know this is one of my favorites, even still in my collection. Such a beauty. Looks so good with these kinds of colors too. I also have a couple liquid eyeshadows that definitely have a hint of purple in them. This one is like a silvery, light, dusty purple, and then this one is definitely more of a blue, but that has a purple shift. So I do want to swatch them both just to keep them in this roundup. So here we have the Milk Makeup Eye Pigment in the shade Peep Show. I don't think this is something that's available anymore, but this is like a silvery purple kind of shade. It's such a beautiful shade, and it is quite comparable to Couche, but definitely more purple. And this next shade is a Magnificent Metals from Stila. This is a Glitter and Glow, and this is in the shade Into the Blue. definitely pulls more blue, but it's comparable to how this Cliona Crystalline has that shift of purple to it, and I think there definitely is some serious purple undertones, even though this is called blue. You can see when you shift it, it has a lot of dimension, including some silvers, purples, and blues. And sticking on that singles theme, we may as well swatch these shades that are my depotted Colourpop shadows. The shades that I would consider purples, I think all come from the Colourpop Pretty Much palette, so I'm going to swatch them and let you know what these shades are all called. So from the Colourpop Pretty Much palette, we have this shade called NVM, which is really a gray kind of shade with a purpley undertone. It's a very faint color, really good for just buffing out a look or as a light transition shade. And then this next one is called Cool It, I believe, which is a berry kind of tone. There's definitely some red in there, a little bit of warmth in there, but it is quite purple still. And next up we have Neither Do I, also from the Pretty Much palette. This one is a really underutilized shade in my collection for sure. It's just not really anything interesting. It definitely is a bit of a brown burgundy kind of base with a hint of purple. And then lastly, we have OTP, also from that palette. I was debating whether or not I should swatch that one because it definitely pulls very fuchsia pink in my opinion, but there definitely are elements of a light lilac in it as well. So let's hop into the pre-made palettes now, and I'm not doing this in any sort of order. This is just the first one I grabbed. This is the Magic Mini by Juvia's Place, and there are two purpley kind of shades in here. One is, again, that kind of duochrome sort of look, and then this one is a deep purple matte. So the first shade here is very similar to that Cliona one that I first swatched. This one is called Faso. It definitely is more purple, less blue, but it's that beautiful sort of shifty, almost duochrome kind of shade. So much reflection. It's such a beautiful, beautiful color. And then this one here is called Ife or Ife. I don't know how to pronounce it. I do apologize. Which is a deep, almost indigo kind of purple shade. So beautiful. Look at that purple. Those colors are miraculous together as well. This next palette is the Nabla Soul Blooming palette, and I actually do want to compare Garden Gate to that shade from the Juvia's Place palette, so that's why I decided to pull this one next. But I'm going to swatch these three purpley kind of shades here as well. These ones are definitely more blue, but in any case, I kind of wanted to just add them into this roundup regardless. And here is Garden Gate. It's not at all the exact same as Faso from Juvia's Place. It definitely has more warmth to it, I'd say. And it doesn't seem to shift quite as much, but it's so, so beautiful. Or like warmth in the base, but the reflection is more silvery. Interesting. And then this one is Anemone. Always makes me think of Finding Nemo. Actually, in this roundup, it definitely does look quite purple, but in the palette, it screams very navy to me. So I'm glad that I did decide to swatch that with these. And then lastly from Soul Blooming, we have Flowery, which is that periwinkle kind of pastel shade. True matte. It's quite a dry matte, but it's such a gorgeous shade. And honestly, it looks so beautiful and it just blends effortlessly. These are the kinds of almost pastel shades that I find just work so, so well. Next up, let's swatch my pretty dirty, grubby Subculture palette. There are, I think, 4 shades I'm going to swatch in here. Rowdy is definitely just that deep eggplant kind of purple, and then there's these two. This one, Mercury, I don't know if it's going to pull very purpley in the swatch, but I think it reads quite purple. And this one as well, it looks white, almost pink in the pan, but I do think there's hints of purple in there as well. So I'm going to swatch all of those. Okay, so this first shade is Cube from Subculture. And I'm not sure that you're going to even be able to see any of the swatch at all, but there definitely is that pink, light lilac purple shift to it. And then next up we have All Star, which is again a berry kind of shade. Definitely has brown, red, maroon undertones, but there is a hint of purple for sure, like that touch of blue in it that makes it read purple in my eyes. Next up we have Mercury, which is a very deep taupey gray kind of shade. Oops. But it definitely has undertones of purple in it. And then lastly here we have Rowdy, which is, like I said, that kind of eggplant, aubergine, almost charcoal kind of purple shade. Oh my gosh, look at this roundup. I love how it goes from like super light, super bright, and kind of shimmery, sheeny shades all the way up to these deeper tones of purples. That is so beautiful. This next palette is the e.l.f. NJ Kissa To The Rescue palette. There are 3 purple shades, just like there are 3 of every color that is within this palette. I'm excited to swatch these. I feel like I haven't played with the purples in this palette quite enough, so I'm excited to hopefully ignite some interest in these shades. We're also moving over to my right arm. My left hand is not very coordinated, and I also have a small injury, so I will not I fell camping. It's not a big deal, but it's kind of cut up, so I don't want to get any eyeshadow into it. So we're gonna be swatching with basically these 2 fingers and potentially my pinky. I don't think it has enough strength in it, so we shall see. We'll see. It's going to be interesting. So first up, from the e.l.f. NJ Kissa palette, we have Sadie, which is one of those warm sort of purple shades. This is a beautiful, beautiful color. I'm not gonna lie, probably not the best formula. It's quite dusty, but you can definitely build up all of the shades in this palette, and the sheerness is kind of nice if you're trying to not create a super dramatic look right from the get-go. And then next we have Pretty Girl, which is a beautiful, almost, it has quite a bit of blue and gray in it, but it definitely is still a deep purple. Such a stunning shade. And then lastly we have Confetti. Really hard to swatch with my pinky here, guys. But it is just a beautiful, like, true shimmer purple. Next up, we have my Fenty Beauty Galaxy palette. This is such a stunning palette. I've really come to appreciate this so much more in the past few months. I'm really happy to still have this in my collection. I did consider decluttering it a couple times, but in any case, I have 2 purple tones in here, and they're so beautiful, so I'm so excited to swatch these. So this first shade here is Space Out, which is kind of like a smoky kind of purple with a ton of dimensional shimmer in it. Is so beautiful. I love that shade so much. I love that smoky base element to it. And then next is Ultraviolet, which is much more, I'd say, on the burgundy side. It has much more warmth, much more red to it, but it is such a stunning dimensional purple as well. So beautiful. Oh my goodness. This next palette is my Urban Decay Electric palette, my oldest palette in my collection. There are 2 purpley shades in here. So this first shade is called Jilted, which is this stunning, warm, berry, fuchsia kind of color. It is so amazing, and even though this palette is really old, I feel like this performs amazingly still. I think it's such a special color. And then this next shade is called Urban, which is like a true purple. This is the kind of like purple eyeshadow you think of when you think of purples, I suppose. Does that make any sense as a descriptor? It's like just that perfect middle ground between red and blue, but it's something super special. And like the shade Jilted, I feel like it really does perform amazingly, even after having this in my collection for probably like 6 years at this point, 5 or 6 for sure. This next palette is the ABH Norvina Volume 1 palette. There's a lot of purpley kind of tones in here, so I wanted to definitely swatch this and make sure I had enough space for these sorts of shades. There's a good selection of these, and I'm really excited to swatch all of them, so let's hop on into it. So first up, we have A1, which is a very light lavender, kind of very faint pastel shimmer. It definitely pulls quite white, but it has that hint of purple in it, most definitely. Next is A2, which is a bright purple shade. I love how much of a white base there is in this, yet it is not pastel at all. It's actually almost a little bit kind of neon berry. And then A3 is just the deeper variation of that with a touch more red, a bit more warmth to it as well. Not the greatest swatches. These do perform really well on the eyes. They do take a little bit of building up for sure. So the next shade here is B1, which is a much more pink purple. I still think it's purple, kind of fuchsia shade. but it definitely leans very pinky. And then next up is B4, which is again, that like true purple, like that, like when you think of a grape, even though they don't really look like this, you just think of this kind of true purple, the perfect middle ground between red and blue. And then lastly, we have B5. This one has a tiny bit of shimmer in it in the pan, but I don't think it really translates at all to have any sort of shimmer in it. It's the slightest bit warmer than B4, but it still definitely has a bit of coolness to it and a bit of dustiness to it as well. And still in the ABH Norvina palette, this shade is called C4. I feel like there's a lot of redundancy in this palette. As you can see, like some of these shades really don't need to be duplicated. They look very similar on the eyes and even in the swatches, which is unfortunate. And then this one here is called D2. Yeah, it's for sure very blue, but I wanted to see it just to swatch it out and just to see. But yeah, that definitely is blue. There's nothing about it that reads as purple, even though in the pan it definitely has purple shimmer. It really doesn't look purple at all in the swatch. My bad. This next palette here is the e.l.f. Mad for Matte Jewel Pop palette. These are all matte shades, and there is one that's a bit more of a berry kind of tone in here, and another one that's more of that true cool purple shade. These don't have shade names, but there is that more berry kind of tone. And then this one is more of the true kind of cool purple sort of tone. This next palette is the Blush Tribe Blossom palette, all mattes in here, and there are two purples in this palette. This one's more of a pastel, and then this one is more of that kind of warm eggplant kind of shade. I'm excited to swatch these. This arm is definitely much more matte, so this is actually really fun to have this in this roundup. So the first shade I have here is Dahlia, which is such a beautiful, almost like warm, again, really warm kind of purple shade. And in the pan, it looks much more deep, but in swatching it, it's not quite as deep as it looks for sure. It's much more of a mid-tone kind of purple. And then this one is called Lysanthus, I believe. This is a pastel purple or like a light lavender shade. So beautiful. I don't reach for that often enough, but I do find that the pastels in the Blossom palette are not the best performing. They do take quite a lot of building up, so that's the reason why I don't really reach for this shade. This next palette is the Urban Decay Born to Run palette. This is kind of the reason why I wanted to swatch all my purples, is because of this shade right here called Drift. But there are 4 kind of purple berry shades in here, and I'm excited to show you guys how they perform because, well, you'll see. You'll see why. I also want to switch back to this arm because I want to see what they look like compared to these shades right here from Subculture. So this first one here is called Hell Ride. I wanted to see how it looked compared to All Star from Subculture, and it definitely is a lot brighter. I do not like the way that this shade performs on the eyes, but actually in the swatch it doesn't look terrible compared to a lot of the similar sort of tones, but I personally really don't like it on the eyes. I find it just really hard to blend, really difficult to work with. This next one is called Wild Heart, and again, I find the same issue, and yeah, you can definitely see, I mean, my pinky is not the strongest finger, but you can really see it's nothing special at all. And then Guilt Trip. I think this is one of the better performing purples in this palette, but it is not great. It really isn't great at all. It's really pretty actually in this swatch, but it doesn't perform very strongly on the eyes. It's a nice, just like true purple kind of shade and a metallic finish, but not the best. And then lastly, we have Drift. I feel like this pulls very purple, although it definitely is more of a gray gunmetal kind of shade. And Drift is really the reason why I wanted to swatch all these shades, because that's now in my pan, those eyeshadows, and I wanted to kind of see what shades I could pair it with from my collection. This next palette is the Masquerade Mini by Juvia's Place. There are 2 shades for sure I would consider purples. I kind of question about Chi. It is a little bit blurple, but I do think it's pretty much a true blue. And then this one right here, which is called Calabar. Sometimes I think it pulls a little purpley, other times I think it's just a maroon, but I think I'm gonna swatch that one just to see what it looks like in amongst all of the other purple shades. So the first shade we have here is called Makeda. Oh my gosh, I love this shade so much. I think it blends amazingly This color is just that perfect true purple shade. It's beautiful. It's so beautiful. And then this next shade is called Zobo, which is a berry kind of shade. It does not swatch well. It doesn't actually perform very well either, in my opinion. This last shade is called Calabar, and yeah, this is not really a purple, but sometimes I feel like it has a hint of purple in it, so it definitely looks berry. Like if you see it compared to my nails, it does look berry, so I think it works. I think it works in this roundup. Next up is the Anastasia Modern Renaissance palette. This palette I don't really feel like has a lot of purples, but Buon Fresco for sure is a purple in my opinion. And then I also consider Venetian Red to be a purple. It has that berry tone to it. Oh my gosh, I'm running out of room, guys. This one is Buon Fresco, which is a very gray, cool toned, faint purple shade. And then next up is Venetian Red. I do feel like this pulls very berry, although the name says red, but that one is definitely very berry in my opinion, and it's starting to get kind of dry. This palette is old, but it's still a beautiful shade. This next palette is my Soph X Revolution Extra Spice palette. There is a berry shade in this palette, and then as well as this like deep eggplant brownie kind of tone, so we're going to swatch those as well. This first shade here is called Mulled Wine. This is definitely a true berry kind of shade in my opinion, a nice matte flat berry kind of color. And then this one is called Enchanted, which is like a brown based eggplant kind of color. Not the best formula, doesn't have the most impact, but it is a really beautiful shade. And the final purple in my collection comes from this palette right here. This is the Zulu by Juvia's Place, and this shade right here is the last purple shade in my collection. It's just a beautiful true purple matte shade. And here is that color from the Zulu palette. I love this purple. I think it can be a little bit patchy, but compared to other purples in my collection, I feel like it really blends out so well and so easily, and it really has a lot of intensity right from the get-go. So here we have all of the swatches of the like purpley berry kind of tones in my collection. I just counted them up. There are 54 shadows in this roundup here. I did not think that I had this many kind of purple, berry, lavender kind of colors. Of course, some of these are much more red or much more purple, but it was fun to swatch them out and just to compare them and see what they all looked like. Oh my goodness, this is gonna probably stain, but it was really fun to swatch these out. I cannot believe that I have this many different colors that I consider semi-purple, and yeah, this was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed seeing this roundup. Just watching all these shades with me. Let me know what you thought about this. This was an absolute blast for me though. So that's a wrap. That's absolutely everything for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed coming along and swatching all my purple and berry shadows with me. But that is everything for today. Thank you so much for watching and for hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye everyone.